I think we'll make a start. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Socially Just Justice. I'm Fiona Dyer, I'm Interim Director at the Children and Young People Centre for Justice, and I have the honour of opening today's event. Having socially just justice for young people aged 18 to 25 is something we are very passionate about at CYCJ and are very pleased to be co-leading on this project. What does socially just justice look like and feel like for 18 to 25-year-olds in conflict with the law? This is a joint funded event by the Scottish University's Insight Institute in collaboration with CYCJ, the Universities of Strathclyde, Dundee and Glasgow School of Art, as well as staff and East Ayrshire Council, and of course the young people themselves. And I'm so pleased with the turnout today that I'm sure you'll all agree the importance of this topic. At CYCJ, we're very keen to include the views and involvement of children and young people in the systems that they're involved in. Their participation in the design of these systems is important to aid their understanding and ability to participate, as well as their views being taken into account and real actions being delivered to meet these. To be truly participatory throughout all strands of their work, organisations and systems need to embed incorporation of participation throughout. And this is an area we are developing within CYCJ ourselves with our new co-produced participation strategy. Our participation work is led and driven by the views of children and young people who have experience of the justice system, adopting a youth-led, flexible and responsive approach, which seeks to provide a platform and support to influence change. But one age group we feel that is often overlooked is young people aged 18 to 25. Due to them no longer being classed as children and the protection that this can give, but still making the developmental transition into adulthood. Many of the systems they are involved in do not take these unique developmental factors into account and treat them as adults with specific expectations placed upon them. This is especially evident within justice systems in Scotland, which led to the creation of Socially Just Justice project. So I'd now like to hand you over to Nina Viswani, one of the project leads, to tell you more. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody, and thanks for opening our event, Fiona, and thanks everyone for coming along today. I can't tell you how excited I am to finally be here at this event, launching our headline findings from the Socially Just Justice project. As Fiona said, we think this focus on 18 to 25-year-olds is crucially important. The incorporation of the UNCRC into Scots law outlines the commitment and responsibility of all services, organisations and wider society to uphold the rights of all children, including those in conflict with the law. Yet on an individual's 18th birthday, that special status of child is lifted, despite the passing of a mere 24 hours making little difference in terms of their understanding, maturity or ability to access, participate in or understand the consequences of all forms of justice. As our knowledge and understanding of physical, emotional, cognitive and social development evolves, young adults aged 18 to 25 are increasingly recognised as a distinct group who are in transition and who are caught in a liminal space between child and adult systems in which they do not receive the special protections afforded to children, nor the opportunities and entitlements that the majority of adults expect and receive. We know that young adults are overrepresented in the justice system, experience poorer outcomes, and are more likely to be reconvicted. Yet to date, there remains a distinct policy, practice, and knowledge gap in relation to justice-involved young adults in Scotland. For example, there is currently no specific policy or approach for working with justice-involved adults in Scotland, although there are local pockets of good practice. This project then emerged from a desire to work with and for young adults to understand their experiences of justice and to bring young adults and justice professionals together to create a vision for the future and a roadmap for change. This event is part of that process, and I have to say it's been a really long journey to get here. We first conceived of this project back in the halcyon days of 2019, and we successfully applied for funding as Fiona said, from the Scottish University's Insight Institute. In early 2020, we started planning for a large co-design event bringing together many young people, many justice professionals and professionals from international locations as well. And then you can probably guess how the story unfolds. With the arrival of the COVID-19 pandemic, the project took a pause. And this was at the time when we naively thought that the pandemic would pass in a matter of months. Later, we took time to rethink and redesign the project to become a series of online creative workshops. Yet despite the setbacks, we never lost sight of the ethos that we wanted the project to be informed by design-led approaches and to be genuinely creative and participatory. And that was no mean feat, I have to say. And many, 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 many thanks to my colleagues at the Glasgow School of Art for their tremendous efforts to translate face-to-face co-design work for the Zoom era. And I have to say the project has been a fantastic team effort from everybody involved in the project. Fiona listed the partners who have been involved, some of whom you will hear from today, but others who have been working away behind the scenes. So today is about sharing the early findings from these workshops with you. First, you'll hear from Marianne McCara, who will explain the process and method behind the design-led approach. So Marianne is a Creative Engagement Research Fellow in the Innovation School at the Glasgow School of Art, and she has really been a powerhouse behind the design and delivery of these workshops. After Marianne, we will move on to share some of the findings from the project, and we'll also launch our online exhibition with some of the visual outputs from the workshops. And after that, we'll hear directly from some of the young adults who were involved in the project. After a short but all-important tea break, we'll then split into breakout rooms to have a chance to reflect, interact, and begin to map out what changes needed based on what you've heard today and your own experiences. So it's set to be a really busy 2 hours. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Marianne, who'll explain the method and the process.
Great, thanks, Nina. Right, just bear with me. I'm just going to, oh, can I just screen share if that's okay? I've just got some slides. There we go. Okay. I can see that, okay. Okay. Thanks so much, Nina, and good morning, everyone. Yes, Nina says, my name's Marianne, and I'm a research fellow at the Innovation School at the Glasgow School of Art in the areas of creative engagement and participatory design. And our research agenda at the Innovation School really centres on addressing complex societal challenges through design-led collaboration, where we engage with people, communities, organisations in the creation of preferable futures. Our work is all about establishing new communities of practice and is inherently interdisciplinary. So for us, this was a really exciting opportunity to collaborate with the University of Strathclyde, CYCJ, the University of Dundee, all the project partners and the young adults who took part in this SUI-funded project. So yeah, as Nina has said, designing this fieldwork for this project came at a really interesting time for research. As we all know, over the last 12 months, the constraints imposed by social distancing in light of the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a range of unique and complex challenges in participatory research. And in response to this, we had to quickly reorientate the approach we were going to originally take in this project, which would have been facilitated in person. So this morning, I'm going to walk you through the process and share with you some of our reflections for undertaking distributed creative engagement. As both Fiona and Nina have outlined, while young adults receive specific attention in other policy areas, there still remains a notable gap in policy and approaches for working with justice-involved young adults in the 18 to 24 age bracket in Scotland. So through creative design-led approaches, this project sought to better understand what is distinct about the experiences of this specific age group and to begin scoping what future policy and practices are needed to implement meaningful change. So as this was taking place during the pandemic, we were presented with several interesting and new design challenges as to how to facilitate engagement that was now going to have to take place virtually with a geographically distributed group of participants and who might also have different and varying participation needs. For this, I worked very closely with Ruth Carricker from CYCJ and the team to explore and prototype together what a hybrid approach to engagement could look and feel like as an experience in terms of accessibility and technology, tone and pace. And we co-developed a set of tools over a series of iterations, taking the form of a workshop in a box kit that could be posted out to each participant and which could then be used to scaffold synchronous participation during workshops hosted over Zoom. These tools were then piloted and evaluated by a group of young adults over 2 workshops, who were then able to provide us with really valuable feedback on the workshop format, as well as the language, usability and effectiveness of the tools themselves, insights which directly informed the subsequent design of the final toolkit itself. Okay, so just to walk you through then the activities in the kit itself, the overarching design of which was based on the concept of a Monopoly board game, which we used as a novel and familiar analogy to map out and structure conversations with participants around different forms of, in this case, social capital. To learn more about their experiences and insights on what social justice in Scotland looks and feels like for this age group, we used property cards to focus the conversation around specific themes, where the participants could begin to map out key assets in their communities: important people, important interactions, important places, organisations and services. The board itself was structured by 4 key talking points, focusing on challenges, rights and entitlements, forms and mechanisms of support, and ways in which things could be improved in the future. The participants then used the property cards to respond to these and populate the perimeters of their boards. This was then followed up by the next activity, which really framed the second workshop and was focused on pulling out key challenges in the justice journey that were raised by the participants. These were then unpacked through metaphor-making activities to explore how these challenges pertain to the young adults' lived experiences and, importantly, their own perceptions of justice. So, with a focus on rights, responsibilities and values, Workshop 2 was a more explorative space for the participants to creatively respond through modelling 2.5D and 3D future visions for social justice using Lego and other lo-fi materials provided in the kit. And through a group show and tell at the end, collectively identifying the key ingredients needed for a socially just place. And you'll be able to see examples of these on our Project Mural board as well, which you will get access to at the break. And so through this process of creative engagement, we were able to glean a range of experiential insights and identified opportunities for policy improvement and innovation with the young adults, key findings which will be shared by Trish in the next presentation. However, in parallel to all of this, we also gained some methodological learnings in terms of designing and facilitating distributed participation. In seeking to create an engaging virtual environment for the participants, we were aware that we didn't want to try and directly replicate an in-person workshop experience online. As a practitioner who's far more familiar with in-person engagement, this was a new challenge for me, and reflecting on this, we realised how much we'd potentially taken for granted the more kind of dialogical and organic nature of in-person interactions, a dynamic that can feel in stark contrast to engagement over platforms such as Zoom. So to try and mediate this, having the workshop in the box kit sent out to participants enabled a more blended experience where we had physical tools that produced material outcomes that complemented and supported our virtual interactions, as well as providing variety in structure and the more unstructured nature of the 2 workshop activities. Having designed, piloted and iterated the engagement tools, Ruth and I also spent time creating a pack of facilitation resources as a handover to the other project team members to undertake their own workshops. This included facilitator notes and a set of editable workshop slides. And doing this really enabled us to expand our geographical reach and recruit more widely young adults to the project. Okie dokie, I'm now going to hand over back to Nina. Thank you.
Hi, Marianne, thank you very much for that. So you now have an idea of how we went about the project, and it's time to share what we have learned so far. So I'm going to hand you over to Trish McCulloch, who is Reader and Social Work Lead at the University of Dundee. So Trish has been co-lead on this project with me, and she has brought so much wisdom and insight into the project, particularly in relation to the analysis. And more importantly, she's kept me calm and on track throughout all the stops and starts of this project. So thank you to Trish, and over to you. I'm just going to share Trish's slides for you.
Thank you, Nina.
See that okay? Yeah.
I can see it, which is a good start. Thanks, Nina, and hello, everyone. Really great to be here. And great, actually, Marianne, to be taken back through the kind of process of how we did this. So I'm hoping that really has given you a flavour of how we went about really involving and hearing from young adults involved in this project. Okay, Nina, can you just move me through the next slide? Okay, our task here is to give you a flavour of the key findings from this project. Essentially, what did the young adults and professionals tell us about how to create a socially just space? What did they tell us about what matters in their experience of justice systems and social systems more broadly? And specifically what needs to change for the future. So there were many prompts, many questions, many activities that we engaged in. But today, Nina and I are going to focus on the findings around three specific questions. The first one is what challenges did young adults face? And that was an area that we spent a lot of time talking about. And young adults had in particular, had a lot to say, and really powerful exchanges around that area. We're going to spend a bit of time looking at what supports are in place, which you'll notice are less than the challenges that young people account and professionals account. And the final theme there, what does social justice look and feel like for young adults? Okay. I think Marianne kind of covered, but certainly we're reporting on a total of 7 two-hour workshops. 6 of those were with young adults, and that was with kind of groups of young adults, and 1 of those was with professionals. Okay, Nina. Okay, I'm reporting here on the findings from young adults and professionals, and what was significant was there was considerable overlap from both groups around these areas. By far, some of the most powerful data and some of the most powerful messages came from the young adults themselves, but really nice overlaps and connections between the two groups. Okay, I guess the first thing to say is there's a lot of words on this slide, and quite often you'd like to reduce that to about 3 bullet points. But the reality is the challenges that the young adults identified were multiple. And even this is a kind of condensing of that. So young adults identified multiple challenges, many of which were persistent. And so not just at this particular stage in their life, but challenges that they've experienced at different stages, and also kind of prolonged in a sense of journeying with them sometimes through the life course. So yeah, just really kind of powerful messages coming across around this theme. One of the first challenges was the challenge of being a young adult, being in that transitionary space. And specifically for young adults in conflict with the law, where there was a really distinct sense that the risks and harms that they experienced and faced really outweighed the opportunities and supports that might carry them through that. So lots of kind of messages around that. I'm going to come on after this slide to give you a flavour of exactly what some people said, and you'll see also some of that on the Miro. But this is just a run through. So that's the first one. The second and really significant message that came across was the challenge of the street, the social space. For some of the young adults, they referred to that as the street. For some, it was the schemes that they lived and grew up in. But generally, this sense of the environment around them. And what was key was young adults spent a lot of time in this space, but it was a really hollowed out space, a space where the things that they wanted and needed were really not there in terms of opportunities, activities, just the way that we spend time. There was also a sense of the street and the scheme being a really dangerous space for many of the young adults. The little kind of image is how one young adult expressed that it's a space where you can end up getting hurt or die. It was also a space where you could hurt others. So really significant challenge of where young adults spend their time. Linked to that, challenges we would be familiar with: peer pressure, alcohol and drugs, violence, and the cultural norms that go with that, the sense of expected behaviour, things to live up to, and the pressures around that. So again, lots of discussion. Probably the key challenge, and it's one that many of the workshops started with, was the polis, and specifically young adults' relationship with the police, and that being a really troubled relationship. It's a relationship where young adults felt targeted, where they felt that it was kind of assumptions based, that they couldn't escape their past, and a real sense of abuse and misuse of power, and kind of daily regular injustices. I'm going to come back to that as one of the areas that I've captured some of the messages that came through. But what's significant about that was it actually emerges as a key relationship, and therefore one that has a lot of potential. So really important relationship that just came up across every workshop, and also that we return to through workshops. Linked to that relationship is the experience of stigma, labelling and discrimination, and the status that comes with being a young adult, and being a young adult in conflict, and that carried with it a particular status that was often harmful for young adults. And that kind of stigma, the labelling and the discrimination experience through that travelled through almost all relationships, particularly with professionals. So whether you were turning up at housing, whether you were talking to a GP or accessing support for mental health, that sense of stigma, labelling and discrimination was a primary feature of people's relationships, and that's what made them challenging. So even relationships that ought to be supportive were accounted as challenging relationships. The wider justice system and actors, key challenge again for young adults. And really there, a sense that the system was acting in other people's interests, and of the young adult being lost in that, and having no sense of who's actually here for me, who's supporting me, who's looking out for my needs. So yeah, the challenge of the young person's place within a system that seems to either prioritise system needs or other people within that system. Solicitors and lawyers came up in that account, and again, a kind of tokenistic sense of attention to the young adult. One of the further challenges was the challenge of isolation, of young adults being very isolated in terms of support and connections, both formal and informal, and just a real lack or absence of the kinds of supports that they need. That's covered in family, peer and community, whether it's kind of what they've experienced in their family relationships, or just the real absence of activities. Young adults would talk about, that there's parks, and the parks are normally run down, used to maybe play football, but a real sense of there's nothing in my community for me anymore. And that was a real sense of isolation and absence. Essential public services. What was really clear is the young adults had a need of multiple public services, as we all do, that these are essential to daily life, to progression. But again, relationships with public service being really limited through stigma, labelling and discrimination. And related to that, transitional support. Yes, there is transitional support there. Many of the young adults, all of the young adults we had the privilege of hearing from, were connected to transitionary support services. So in a sense, this is a particular group of young people, but there was a very distinct sense that these services were limited, and people being lucky to kind of have met particular individuals or particular organisations. So a real sense of isolation and absence in terms of support. Poverty and homelessness, I don't need to say that to the people here. If you're here as a young adult, you know all about that. If you're here as a professional, you will know that's been a key feature of people's experiences. But again, these being persistent and prolonged challenges, repeated challenges, particularly post-prison. And again, the struggle of engaging with services that don't seem to recognise who these young adults are and what their particular needs are. And the final one there, again, really powerful messages coming across about the extent of loss bereavement and trauma that many of these young adults have faced, and the carrying around in your head of the kind of bad thoughts that go with that, and really the kind of daily battle of managing that. And I suppose just looking at that and setting that in the context of all of the above challenges, we start to get a sense of the kind of interactive effects of these things. Those were the key challenges. It's a long list, and there's more, but you know, we've got some fantastic insights from the young people about what these actually mean for them and how they interact. Okay, can you move us on, please? Okay, just touching on the messages around the street. I'm just taking a wee check of where I am time-wise. Okay, so the street, really kind of strong message. I'm going to start off with a quote that will be familiar, I think, to many. I came from a village. There wasn't many services out that way that could help keep you out of bother and all that kind of stuff. So what do? You're young guys, 17, 18, you go out, jump about with your pals and get into bother. And then you're down that road and in and out of the jail and all that sort of stuff. So that links to the challenges I've just been talking about, being a young adult, the street, yeah, and kind of where that leads, and a real sense of that leading to that. But there was also in some of the workshops a kind of darker side to that, a sense of the street as a really dangerous place. So one young adult in the Monopoly board just wrote down the words conflict, drink, enemies, knives, jail, death, paranoid. And what was really interesting in that particular group was the interaction among the young adults themselves about how familiar this was, and the kind of sharing between them of this experience. And that was a really important part of the workshops, actually seeing that kind of peer chat around these things. So yeah, you know, this is not just about not having stuff to do. It's about the kind of danger that exists in these places, and the sense of getting kind of drawn and locked into that. Another one's card said you can seriously hurt someone, you can end up getting hurt or die. And the kind of risks and fears around these were not things that people were laughing about. It was no longer fun. So real kind of fears and concerns around that, not only for themselves but for the people that are coming after them, their own children. And also in the findings for some, a sense of kind of being trapped in that, being locked in. You don't know any different. One of the interesting things in the workshops where we spent a lot of time talking about this, we asked them to think about, you know, how do we change that? How do we change the schemes, if you like? And there wasn't a lot of hope and optimism about that. And so we kind of asked them to think about, what about the kind of places where this isn't going on, where you can be in the street and be out and it feels safer? And we asked them what was going on there, and the things that they said was, well, they've been brought up differently, and speaking to that sense of protection that these other young adults have had, speaking to the kind of socialisation opportunities. They also said they have stuff to do, they have jobs at 16, so speaking to education, opportunities, employment. And the last one, they can see it, but they don't have to live in it. And that sense of entrapment, which really linked to kind of the hope for the future. And in some of the groups where that was quite significant, it was actually really difficult to get people to believe that there was hope for the future beyond escape. There was a sense of the only hope lies in escaping from these communities. Okay, thanks, Nina. The police, again, I've spoken to some of that, and this just captures some of the young adults' voices around that. I said the police is a risk to just people. Another one said, I've got that too. Police just stopping and searching you. How do we deal with that? It's all assumptions, knowing you from your past, knowing your care experience, they just assume. And again, many of the young people felt that their present relationships were dictated by their past and the inability to escape that. Stop and search you for wearing a tracksuit or because of your clothing. So a real sense of the way young people represent themselves and the implications of that. And what was interesting was many of the kind of figures, and you'll see the Lego figures, of how important identity was when they kind of quickly mapped who they were. When you do get pulled up, you get embarrassed being seen with the police in the street. They all ken all the faces, and if you're known to the police, they just target you all the time. Jump out the car, get in your face. and try and get you to kick off with them. Polis, they don't treat you like humans, they treat you like a dog. And I guess I've got these here because this was a theme that the young adults spent a lot of time talking about. And when we were talking, it was a troubling relationship. And they suggested contrasting relationships. And what they identified was wanting to feel safe in relationships, wanting to be able to ask for help, wanting to be able to go to, and a real recognition from the young adults that that trust had really broken down on both sides. So it may seem kind of negative, but actually I've put it there because it was really clear that the young people saw this as an important relationship, and one that could and should be better. Okay, next one. I'll speed up. This is the kind of last one. Okay, what supports are in place? I think the key thing I want to say, much fewer supports highlighted than the challenges, and it speaks to that kind of balance and some of the struggles associated with the imbalance in challenges and support. Key messages around this were supports were limited, they were unequal. Some people had more supports than others. Some of the supports that were there were totally inaccessible. A couple of the young people spoke about people speaking a different language, and so they just kind of backed off, and sometimes they were absolutely absent. And that, again, very much linked to who young adults were and the sense of services just not being geared, not recognising who they were. And lots of interesting connects there with Nancy Fraser's work on justice and social justice and the importance of recognition in that. The other very strong message in some, but not all of the groups, was a real sense of self-reliance, this sense of it's all on me. When we spoke about support, some young people couldn't even envisage what that might look like because they had such a strong sense of it's on me. And that appeared to be linked to experiences of loss and trauma, loss of family, loss of friends, loss of trust, loss of hope. I would suggest it also links into this sense of, is it a private trouble or a public issue? And the young adults most able to identify these issues as a public issue were those that were most connected, who had positive experiences of voice, of peer relationships, of being supported to recognise that their experience was not simply their responsibility, but was actually a public issue. So really important messages around that. More positively, a lot of the young people spoke about the groups, the support services that many of you are no doubt involved in. They spoke about the significance of youth services, of young adult services, and of transitional support services, and of these creating opportunities, capacities, hope and growth. And there were some fantastic messages there, and I'll touch on that briefly before I hand over. So a real kind of double-sided coin in the findings there. And as we hear consistently, they spoke about people making a difference, relationships making a difference, and these being the spaces where you discovered that this wasn't all on you, that there were opportunities out there, that you have capacities, that there is room for growth. So yeah, really kind of dual messages coming out around that area. Nina, can you move me on to the last slide, please? Again, this just gives you a flavour of that contrast and really thinking about the kind of move between a sense of it being private troubles or public issues. On the left, accounts up saying it's all on you. You can only be guided, can only help yourself. For one person, the answer to how do we change things for the future was don't be a wee fanny, end of. And for him, it was all on him. And that sense of isolation was really powerful. I have no one left for me bar my girlfriend. The other side of that, of course, is the other side of that. And I'll just read through these. Just having opportunities is massive. Opportunities to grow, to be able to survive. And really interested in that is both survival and growth. Like the other week, because I'm part of this group, X gave me a voucher and I just moved house. We were thinking, how are we going to get food this week? We don't have parents we can ask to borrow a tenner from. No loan place would go near us because of our past. I don't think I need to break that down for you. So many messages there about what matters in support, about the challenges that young adults face. The next is staff. So staff as a whole, speaking about a particular organisation, I've been lucky, and again, a strong sense is people have been lucky to have these opportunities. I met X, it's been mental for them. Amount of stuff I've been involved in with Scottish Government, helping to tackle their 5-year plan, talk about my experience. these sort of things. I've been lucky to have these experiences. And I've included that quote because that kind of involvement in things was associated not only with kind of growth and opportunities, but it was associated with hope. And I hope you see the contrast from the voices on the left. Okay, Nina, I think this is where I hand over to you.
Brilliant, Trish. Thank you very much. And as Trish said, there's so many messages that have come out from the workshops, and we can't do hardly any of them justice today. So you did a brilliant run through there, Trish. So obviously the questions we're really looking at kind of what were the challenges, what were the supports in place, and also then we were really interested in what young adults were telling us about what social justice looks and feels like. Often, as you've heard from the challenges that Trish has just shared, our learning was gleaned from the experiences of justice that were most definitely not socially just. However, we were really keen to also take a kind of positive approach to the future with a belief and hope, as Trish has mentioned, a hope that things can and will change in the future. I'm sure that's why so many people chose to get involved in the workshops and why you are all here today, that the future can be different. We therefore distilled our knowledge about this question from 3 separate questions that were explored in the workshops, and you might remember them from the Monopoly board that Marianne showed you. So the 3 questions that really informed this overall research question were: what are the rights and entitlements of young adults? In what ways could things be improved for the future? And what are the key ingredients of a socially just place? And the reality was that social justice is many things and means different things to different people at different times. However, there were core concepts that featured across each of the workshops. And I'm going to just run through them very quickly just now. Like Trish, I've got some quotes and feedback from the young adults themselves. But young adults said that social justice was feeling safe and protected. It was having fair and equal treatment, a level playing field from which to grow and progress. Young adults wanted person-centred, timely and holistic support across the life course, but particularly at points of transition. Young adults wanted justice responses that help them and don't harm them. They wanted easy access to essential public services. They wanted relationships, they wanted positive connections and restorative relationships. And they wanted opportunities and alternatives. They wanted pathways out, and they wanted that hope that Trish spoke about. So young adults talked about the importance of feeling safe, which was most clearly linked to having a safe home or safe places to go. Many of the visions of the future weren't unrealistic, they weren't overly ambitious, but they were modest and focused on an improved physical, social and cultural environment. Really just the things that we all want and expect in life for ourselves. So they talked about improving the local zoo, or having your own front door, or upgrading to a bigger house with a garden. And one of the quotes from the young adults there: "I want the world to be safe for my son when he grows up." And it's that bit about escaping the past and not letting the past define you, but also not defining future generations. Safe places and spaces were also related to fair and equal treatment. Young adults felt that they should not be judged or discriminated against. Where you happen to live shouldn't shape your future. Whether you're a well-kent face in a small village, or your home is in a scheme where you're living in fear and constantly looking over your shoulder. Young adults also talked about procedural justice and having a second chance and a fresh start. As Trish said, not letting your past define your future. And particularly for those in transition from prison to community, they wanted a return to a community that was safe and welcoming and didn't create more problems than it solved. And the long-term kind of impacts of having a criminal record really had huge ramifications for the young adults. And they talked about opportunities and services that were in place that, again, maybe weren't designed to meet their needs. So job opportunities that were overly competitive or didn't understand some of the challenges that people faced. Young adults also wanted person-centred services, services that were designed for them, not shoehorning young adults into children's services or into adult services. They wanted services that met their needs. And these really included friendly and welcoming spaces, which was something I think that a lot of the spaces, whether they are outdoor spaces or services, they didn't necessarily welcome young adults in those spaces. They wanted drop-in services and support groups for young adults that were open at suitable times, open in the evening or late at night when the problems and the challenges that they faced were maybe heightened. And they really wanted a one-stop shop for advice, support and connection. So these services really centred, as Trish said, on these essential services that everybody should have a right to. Housing services, education and employment, mental health and well-being services, services that focus on trauma and loss, services that supported people with substance issues, and services that really supported people at these points of transition. And you'll see that in a lot of the visual outputs when we tour the exhibition. You know, there was a lot of talk about services connecting together, services working in the best interests of young adults, and the best interest of young adults can also have the best interests of the community and the wider society at their heart. Trish really powerfully highlighted what young adults have been telling us about the harm that the system causes, and young adults wanted help. They didn't want to be harmed further. They'd often experienced significant harms in their life. They wanted to be helped rather than harmed. And I think that's really important in relation to justice. We're hearing a lot about kind of trauma-informed services, trauma-informed justice. But actually the challenges that Trish highlighted really suggest that we're a long way from that when it comes to justice. And the young adults were really kind of positive. It was like, instead of taking them to court and charging them, you could give them a help or workers to support them through it all and stop them causing trouble. So it was about helping before some of that harm by the system was even caused. So helping before people get in contact with the justice system, not after. People wanted community centres and services that really were part of the community, that weren't separate from the community as well. So Trish talked about restorative relationships and the importance of relationships to young people. And as Trish highlighted, the police was really identified as a key relationship. The young adults wanted more dialogue and more understanding with the police in particular, but with services and the community more widely. As I said, young adults wanted to be welcomed and valued and respected without feeling targeted, labelled or discriminated against. So no judgment at all. The community needs to support us by giving trust, respect and dignity. We need to be listened to, not just heard. Communication needs to be there. We also need to have the same person, one direct contact. So really having that continuity of support from childhood through to adulthood. And this is quite a common theme in relation to the supports that can be in place as young people go through young adulthood, and in other policy areas such as care experienced young people, there has been that recognition that support needs to be in place up to age 26 and potentially beyond. And I think justice experienced young people have these kind of same desires and same needs as well. Lastly, young adults wanted to have a future. They wanted to grow and make progress, not a return to the same old scheme or the same old street or the same old situation. And I'm going to move on to show you some of the designs shortly, but the designs, when you look at them, have lots of references to doors and windows and bridges. And these often were representing the space between past experiences and possible futures. So these doors and windows could be an opportunity if they opened, but they could be a barrier if they did not. And from the young adults, there was real uncertainty about what the future could bring, linked to the kind of challenges and structures and experiences you've heard about today. Now, obviously, the main focus we have been looking at is what the young adults have been telling us. We really wanted to kind of privilege some of those voices today. But obviously, we did undertake workshops with justice professionals, and there's a whole range of outputs that have come from that as well. But it was really interesting to compare and contrast how young adults and justice professionals envisioned socially just justice to be. And Trish said there was quite a lot of synergy in the challenges that are identified, and likewise there was quite a lot of synergy in the way that the future should look like. So young adults said they wanted to be safe and protected. Professionals said that young adults had the right to safe spaces and places. Young adults wanted fair and equal treatment. Professionals wanted fairness and equality of treatment for young adults. Young adults wanted person-centered support. professionals wanted person-centred responses, and there was a real recognition that at the moment services had a tendency to try and fit people into neat boxes and were quite inflexible to the needs of young adults. Young adults wanted responses that didn't harm them. Professionals talked about a justice system that was trauma-informed, fair and proportionate. Young adults wanted easy access to essential services. Professionals talked about age-appropriate services, and in particular, no cliff edges in transition. So none of this arbitrary cutoff at 18, but services that were designed around individuals' needs and wants. There was talk about restorative relationships from the young adults. The professionals equally recognised that there needed to be a changing narrative. We needed to change narratives about young adults, about who they are and about what their contribution is to society. And this was particularly highlighted to be an issue with the media for the professionals. The professionals recognised that relationships would need to be healed and young adults would need to be valued and welcomed. And actually the word hope has come up a lot today, and the young adults have asked for opportunities and alternatives, but the professionals equally recognised that there was a need to provide young adults with meaningful opportunities, but also to give hope, to give a certainty that there will be a future for everybody. So really, that's a very quick run through of our key findings. But this event is not the end of our process. We're kind of somewhere along the way on our journey towards social justice. And as a result of this, this is just a very kind of early look at our findings. We do plan to produce a whole range of outputs, kind of research reports, accessible outputs, for example. But as part of our outputs, we have created this online exhibition with some of the key outputs from the workshops. And after the event and in the break, I'll post a link to the exhibition in the chat box, but you'll be also sent an email.
Take yours out, mates.
You'll be sent a link to the exhibition, and you can go in and explore it yourselves and interact with it and make comments on it and share your views and share your experiences. And we'll be able to incorporate all of that into our outputs at the end. So we're quite short on time today, so I just want to give you a real quick run through of it. But as I say, this exhibition will be running for up until the end of June. So you will have the opportunity to explore this in your own time. Okay, can everybody see that? So this is what you'll see when you log on. So it's the exhibition is located on a board called Miro, but everybody can access it. And it really is designed for you to be able to explore. So you can start off and it explains a little bit about the project. If we zoomed in too far there, but it explains a little bit about what the project is and what this exhibition is all about. So you can read about that there. And then you navigate the exhibition. You can follow the arrows if you are that way inclined, and you follow the arrows in IKEA, or you can approach it in any way you like. But the arrows might help you to kind of understand where we are. And really, these are some of the Lego creatures where Trish was talking about, where the participants designed their own Lego people to kind of reflect them, or to reflect people in a kind of socially just environment. So we have the creations from the workshops, and then a bit of a summary in terms of the visual outputs in relation to the challenges that young adults face and the services that are in place. So again, you can zoom in and you can choose to look as closely as you like. I don't want to make you all seasick here by zooming in and out too fast, but you can have a look at what people have been saying. We've kind of got some highlights there for you. You can have a look at the board, and then if you continue to follow through the exhibition, you'll see the young adults and what the justice professionals and their boards and the kind of things that they were saying. And you have the opportunity to add comments to the board. There's on the left of the screen, you'll see a little comment button that you can click on and stick that on and add your comments on the board. So if you can, try not to stick them over the images so other people can go in and have a look, but stick them around the images. And there's also information here on what's going to happen next with the project, and space to provide comments more generally on your overall kind of thoughts and views. So here you can comment on what people have been sharing from the workshops, or also add your own thoughts and views and experiences. So this is a public document, so anyone who has access to it can see it, and anyone can interact with it as well. Okay, so as I say, this will be open until the end of the month. I will put the link in the chat at the tea break so you can have a chance to have a look at that. But just now, I'm going to hand you over to Ruth Kerricher and Chris Marshall, who will share with you some of the young adult perspectives and key messages that the young adults wanted to share with you today. So Ruth works jointly across staff and CYCJ and leads on participation. And Chris is a member of Youth Justice Voices, which is a youth-led participation group. And Chris also had the joy of being one of our socially just guinea pigs, in that he took part in our pilot workshop. So huge thanks to you, Chris, for helping to get the workshops to their kind of final design. So I'm just going to try and share the screen, and I'm remembering to put the video clip sound on, and hopefully everybody can see that. Oh, the wrong one. Just give me a second. Okay, I don't think I can do full screen here, but over to you, Chris and Ruth.
Okay, thanks, Nina. Chris and I had the pleasure of being involved in this project. Chris is an active and very committed member of Youth Just Us. As Nina said, took part in the pilot, but he's also been involved behind the scenes, helping plan the event today, and also helping shape how we gathered more young adults' views for this part of the event. So what we're going to talk about now is just the young adults' experiences of the whole project and process. So as well as sharing their views directly through the workshops, we also, in between the workshops and the event, asked young adults how they wanted to be involved in this event. So they decided that they wanted to share feedback in a number of different ways. We're going to show you a video with some audio clips, which is young adults' direct experiences of being involved, what it was like taking part, and also for you to hear some key messages that they want to share with you. So we really hope through later on that you really take these messages on board and consider how you can make a difference in the short and long term. So questions we asked was, why did you decide to become involved? What was it like taking part? And what are the key messages you want to share with the people here today? So if you could change to the next slide, we'll hear directly from the young adults.
Okay, the sound on this can be a little bit quiet, so if you can turn your volume up, that might help a little bit, but here's what some of the young adults have been telling us.
I got involved because I wanted my voice to be heard and let others know how I was treated.
First, Malcolm asked me to get involved. I didn't really know what it was about, but then obviously Malcolm explained it to me and said what I need to do. He said it was all about bringing change to in the jails and the Police Scotland, all that kind of stuff. So I said aye to him that I'd help out with it.
I really enjoyed taking part because it let others know how I get treated.
But I thought the workshop was good because it gave everybody the chance to say what they wanted to say. I thought they were alright. I haven't really had to do anything like that since primary school, to be honest with you, so it was a bit weird doing that kind of stuff again, but it was good. It gave us all something to do, something to focus on. It's just more complicated than it needs to be, innit? It would be easier if it was just face to face.
I want to change the way the justice system is because I think people get treated unfairly.
Just that basically, if they've got the power to make change, they should do it. Focus on helping us instead of instead of hitting us down. If you can't, I mean, just the police really. I mean, the way they talk to folk, the way they treat folk, they think they're bigger than everybody else because they've got this power to basically wreck somebody's life. Just the way they treat us, I mean, like in the cells and things like that, like even if you're getting out, they still treat you as if you've done something wrong. Just the way they speak to you sometimes. You could chat on your door, ask them for like a book or a magazine, or just even ask them if you can go to the toilet or what the time is, and they could tell you to get tea or fuck off, something like that. They're just really cheeky towards you. They don't really hear you if you have anything to say.
Tell them just to help the young people instead of just firing them in the back of a van or sentencing them. Tell them to start groups. To help young people, i.e. with mental health or that.
Okay.
I'd like to change the police attitude towards young people
And
the court system.
Okay.
And the sentencing for young people, because I got sentenced when I was really young to a long sentence.
What do you think the police could do to make it better?
Talk to you instead of running up and grabbing you, and build a relationship.
Young people have a voice and they have rights, and they should treat all young people fairly.
Listen to what we've all got to say and then make a change on that.
Okay, so thank you to the young adults who shared their views there via the audio clips and videos. I think they're really impactful. We also, as I said, looked at other ways. So some of that involved speaking to young adults over the phone, where they would directly share their views, as well as over email in response to the questions. I think one of the things what has come out really clear in the messages after the workshops, but also within what Trish and Nina have talked about, is that young adults actually really want to have the opportunity to have their voices heard, and they want to have the opportunities to take part in participation groups, and they want to do this in different creative ways. What we really seen there, you can see from the bottom quote in the right hand corner, is young adults really felt that there needed to be more things in place for 18 to 25-year-olds, and they've seen that as a distinct sort of age which needs a distinct and specialised support as well. We also found that young adults spoke about feeling that they were treated really differently when they reached 18. You can see in the middle quote there where this young adult's talking about that even with employment, he felt the groups weren't as good when he got to 18. And again, they're just wanting more opportunities and having a much more lengthier time of support, which supports their needs as well. Another thing what came out as well was the idea around, I suppose, Pullman or prison not being appropriate for young adults, and there was a suggestion that secure care could be put up to the age of 21. But as this young adult says here, they recognise that it's not the right place for everyone in the last resort, but they want more supportive options. And another thing what became distinct as well, as we've seen in their messages too, is people want people to learn from their earlier experiences, so they want the opportunity to be heard and listened to. But also, unfortunately, a lot of these children and young people have had past experience of the justice system, and that's followed them through into the later years as we hear about stigma and discrimination. So I hope you can listen to these views and act on them as we go. But without further ado, I'm really keen to pass over to Chris, who he's chosen as well as to talk about how he found the whole experience and his key messages, but he's also a keen photographer, so he shared that through images as well.
Thanks very much, Ruth. So hi everyone, I'm Chris, if you've not met me yet. So why did I decided to get involved in this sort of pilot and this project? Because it's another opportunity for people like myself to share our views through a different way. So usually it would just be workshops, and it would just be you, like myself, getting asked questions, or other people getting asked questions. But this really interested me because it was getting done in a different way. It was getting done creatively, and that's something I engage more with. Taking part throughout the whole project for me over the two workshops was quite a an amazing experience. It's having the box, having a little box we got sent out with all the materials, and having not to worry about turning up to a workshop, not having a pen because it's all there, was really good. It's simple things like that that helps us along the way, especially for myself as a young person and other people. Just a few, you may be wondering why there's a couple of photos there, and that is just to help represent a couple of these answers that are coming up. So a couple of key messages that I have from myself to everyone here today is engage with us. That's what I want. We're just wanting, like say the police or people to engage with us instead of, as other people are saying, instead of putting us in the cells, or instead of just putting us in the cells and leaving us there, and not really finding out the whole cause of why we acted in that certain way. There was a quote there on the previous page that said, it can take some people longer to learn, and that's very true. It can take people ages to break out of the cycle of crime and stuff, but also my photos are there to represent the sense of freedom that I've had. I've had personal experience with the justice system, but the sense of freedom and the sense of having opportunities in the community to go out, and even for me, taking photography as a hobby for me, it gets me out, it keeps me out of trouble. It's stuff I'm engaged in. Another key message for me is, especially for practitioners and professionals, is when you've got young people in a group, especially just now how it's still blended when we're online, is try and keep us engaged. And Ruth and other people, when we've been a part of these workshops, have always found different ways to do that. So instead of sticking to your old boring ways, maybe branch out a bit and maybe look at what creative stuff can you bring into your group, and what creative stuff will your young people be involved in. And I'll pass you back to Ruth.
That was great, thank you, Chris. Can we go to the next slide, please, Nina? So Chris and some of the other young adults who took part in the pilot wanted to share as well as about the process of taking part online, what we sort of learned from that. So whilst we learned that face-to-face is definitely good and more interactive, and we still need to give people the opportunity to take part, and if at the moment, if that's digitally, people still want to do that, but I think blending the online and offline really works well. So like Chris said, making some tools which are fun and familiar, like Monopoly, works particularly well for us. I think it was really evident as well in terms of doing online research. This is a thing that comes up again and again about needing to drop the jargon and consider what language you use. So I think this was a quote from Chris actually. He was saying keep it simple. So we really looked again at the questions and adapting them so you were really clear what you were asking people, and that's particularly important when you're still asking them to express themselves creatively. Other things as well we learned is whilst we expected that there would be some glitches when you do things online, you really have to prepare for that, particularly if it's for young adults you don't have a relationship with, because whilst you're trying to build rapport with people, you're also trying to get people online, working devices and waiting for that lag. So that's one thing we took from that, is allowing lots of time for discussions and learning from each other. And I think having the creative tools worked particularly well for that, because those who weren't confident speaking out or did have technical difficulties could send the pictures in to represent their views. I think again, building that rapport is really important, as well as finding the workshops insightful, interactive, and as an important method for people to have their voices heard. Some of the young adults also shared that they really just liked the company and banter as well. And I think another thing, again, particularly as we do things online, I think rewarding people for their time, I think that was really appreciated. And it was also important that we made sure people had data and things like that to take part as well. That's all from us, but thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Chris, for that. Okay, we have managed to carve out an extra couple of minutes, so you'll have time to actually drink the tea in the tea break. So if after the break, we'll break into breakout rooms. So come back to the main room after the break, but We'll then go into breakout rooms where we can hear your reflections and suggestions for change in the future. So feel free to kind of turn your cameras off, grab a cup of tea, and if you come back here at 11:15, we'll get you into the breakout rooms. What I will do is put a copy of that mural link in the chat where our exhibition is. So if you want to have a look around at that during the break, you're welcome. But as I said, it will be available until the end of the month. So don't worry if you need refreshments. Okay, but thank you very much for all your inputs this morning, and we'll see you at 11:15. Have any questions, then you can add them in the chat. This is probably the easiest way to do that. So how will the participants hear about the legacy of their work? A question from Amanda Corrigan. Very good question. And I think one of the things that we have been really hearing from young adults is that it's not enough just to consult with young adults. They don't want their engagement to be tokenistic. So actually this event is not the end of our work. As I said, it's part of a journey, part of a process. I think this has become the project that is never ending. And what we do plan to do, probably towards the end of the summer, we need to work out the exact details, is to have another workshop, another design workshop, and it will need to be quite small. But what we want to do is bring together kind of organisations or services or agencies who are really keen to make a change, whether there's something specific they want to do or just to rebuild relationships. And we will bring together the participants from the workshops, the young adults, whoever wants to be involved, who's been involved before, we will bring them back together with the services or organisations that have signed up to really work together really closely to make those changes. So the young adults might have thought that their role was over, but they have still got a job to do, as do we all. So it is really important that they get to see those changes, and that gets to really inform how justice goes forward for 18 to 25-year-olds. For those who don't want to be involved, or for those who can't, as I said, we can't involve everybody in the next stage. We do plan to produce a whole range of outputs. So the exhibition is one, and please do take time to have a look at that and to see what other people are commenting on. And we will be producing kind of research outputs and also accessible outputs. And we want to make sure that they are accessible to young adults. So again, we'll be involving young adults in the production of those outputs and in helping to shape what they look like. And we'll be sharing all of that information with everybody who's been involved and more widely as well. So hopefully that's answered your question, Amanda. If anybody else got any questions or any reflections on their breakout room or what they've heard today?
Nina, maybe I could fill the time a little bit, but I think there's really good parallels between the need to rethink the way that we respond to 18 to 25-year-olds who are involved in conflict with the law, with the same way that we need to think differently about the 16 and 17-year-olds who might need referral to the children's hearing. And I think there's a real parallels in that. I imagine that the learning from this would be very helpful for thinking about the particular needs of 16 and 17-year-olds as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of the feedback we got from the workshops as well was just a bit of a word of warning, a bit of caution, that we talk a lot about these arbitrary cutoffs, whether that's 16 or whether that's 18. But by looking at 18 to 25, then we're actually just creating another arbitrary cutoff at 25. And we know from kind of research into brain development that 25 on average is the time that people's brains, reach maturity, but we know that everybody is different and not everyone will get to that stage at the same time, but depending on their own individual differences and their personal backgrounds and experiences. So I think you're right, we need to look at extending that learning down the way, but also up the way as well. What's socially justice for everybody? It doesn't just stop at 25. And if we're having a better recognition of people's backgrounds and childhood experiences, again, that doesn't stop influencing you just because you hit 25. So I think there's a lot to learn and a lot to take forward.
I can come in with a reflection if you want, Nina.
Yeah.
I think it was, again, we were talking about that not fitting in with age, but also young adults or whoever not having to fit in to your service. So I think some people were inspired by the great Lego design and what you chatted about in terms of involving people in designing services, and also being more creative in terms of how you involve people, but also the timings as well, because that might prevent the crises, what gets people within difficult situations in the first place, if the supports around them are more flexible and actually met their needs, as opposed to a service or a age criteria.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that reflection, Ruth. Do any of the other facilitators have a reflection on the discussion in their workshop?
I was in our workshop, we had a few, in our breakout room, sorry, we had quite a few good points that came up, but just a reflection from what I was hearing is no one was surprised at anything they heard today. It's like, we all know it, we all know it, we've all been told about it, we all hear it all the time. So for me, if we're not surprised by it, like, why are we still chatting about it? It shouldn't be a time to make it move forward, and instead of chatting, make the actions.
Really good point, Chris. Yeah, and that was a bit of a discussion in our breakout as well, that, you know, particularly in terms of relationships and continuity of relationships and trust, and this is nothing new. This is things that we have known forever. So how do we move beyond just talking about it and making change? And that really is, you know, the aim that we have with having this final workshop, where we do want to make specific changes, and that will need to be on small scale and need to be localized, but hopefully from that we can inspire and kind of show people how that change can happen in their organizations or in their local areas. But you're right, Chris, we need to stop talking about it, and we do need to actually do something.
I think, well, not surprised, some of the people in the group I was in expressed a bit of disappointment about the ongoing difficulties in young people's relationships with the police, and, you know, why that might be occurring. It does seem to be perhaps at a street level. There's still a lot of frustration and a sense of powerlessness amongst the police that might feed into that they don't feel apparently able to really address some of the problems they're seeing, don't really know how to address them perhaps, but also that some of the stereotypes that police are holding are about sort of young people as being bad, rather than understanding it in a more trauma-informed way, as you've described.
Thanks for that reflection, Beth. Yeah, in our group there was a chat about maybe bringing police and young adults together in a way, in community activities, to break down some of those barriers and to really stop that perspective of young people because of what's happened to them in the past or because of who they have been, and actually move on to remember that they can be someone else and they are someone else, and what that can be in the future. Okay, we've just got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything else that anybody wants to share or ask a question on?
So just a reflection from our group, we had some of the same things about people weren't surprised, but they were maybe felt quite impacted by hearing it directly, and the depth of feeling around how some of those things were articulated, and how powerful and real it felt about when the stigma was articulated. So that was some powerful points, but the discussion then moved on to how we can change it at an early stage, so that we're not waiting to 18 to 25 to be addressing this, but it needs to be addressed a lot earlier, and also looking at it across the whole system. So it's not just justice, there's also health, mental health provision, there's all sorts of other services that need to be looked at the same time, because it's not justice in isolation.
Great, thank you, Madeline. Okay, we've probably got time for kind of one more reflection or one more question.
Nina, I can come in and just very briefly from our group, and we had insights we were sharing around kind of a lot around the kind of process of participation and reflecting on kind of approaches to that, ways of supporting kind of meaningful participation, and talking a bit about how the process of participation can be just as meaningful as the final outputs. And yeah, ways of kind of talking about the challenges around kind of recruitment and things like that, but obviously then the kind of positive legacies from working in this kind of new digital way, and actually what we learned that we can take forward in our future work, as ways of kind of widening geographical reach and things like that.
Brilliant, Marianne. Thank you very much. So I'm sure there's still, you know, a lot to discuss, and I'll have a lot of questions, but I'm mindful of time, and 2 hours is a long time to be on a Zoom call. So thank you very much for everybody that stayed with us. As I said, this is not the end of the conversation. After the event, we will be sharing the slides. You will get a link to the exhibition if you haven't had a chance to look at that yet. And you will get a link to a short survey, just a few questions to kind of evaluate this event. It will take you about 1 minute. But at the end of that, if there are any people who want to be involved, any young adults here, or any services or organisations that are really serious about wanting to make a change for 18 to 25-year-olds but don't really know what that might look like, or have some ideas that they maybe want to put into practice and are willing to work with young adults to do that, then there's a space at the end of that evaluation to put in your name and your details, and we will get in touch. As I say, we can't promise you that everyone can be involved because we will be limited in numbers, but it is the start of a process, and if this works well, then we hope to be able to kind of share that more widely. So really, lastly, I just want to thank everybody involved today. So the Socially Just Project team, Trish, Marianne, Ruth, Grace, who couldn't be here today, Fernando, Beth, Madeline, Ross, Chris, thank you so much for presenting today. Holly and Charlotte behind the scenes who have kept this event running. Not least, thank you to Stewie for funding the programme and for having endless patience as we stopped and started it. Thank you to all of you for taking part today and for contributing. And thank you to all of the young adults, the justice professionals, and all of the people who helped to set up and recruit to the workshops, and all of the people who took part into the workshops. It's been absolutely brilliant seeing you here today, and do please keep in touch, and do please interact with our exhibition and share your thoughts on there as well. But otherwise, it's just left me to wish you a safe journey home or to the kitchen. And yes, thank you very much. It's been wonderful to have you here.